Welcome to another video from cardboardeast.com. My name's Jay. I play Asian board games and share what I find with all of you. Today, we're going to talk about the best board games from 2018. Now, 2018 was a pretty solid year for board games. These are my three from the West. I picked up Underwater Cities from my first trip to Essen in 2018. Root has now become this amazing classic that's grown beyond everyone's expectations. Brass B is just so good. But 2018 was a really important year for the Asian board game community. That's the year when a lot of indie publishers actually made the trip all the way to Germany, to Essen, largest board game convention in the world. As always, Taiwan Board Game Design was there showing off all these indie board games, as well as other Taiwanese publishers. Also, Korean Board Games is there, showing off their Korean board games. However, there are lots of indie publishers also from Japan, Thailand, Indonesia. In fact, the Indonesian government paid for all these indie Indonesian publishers to be there and bought them a huge booth in like Hall 2, like just the big money hall where like just everything is crazy. And the inside joke among all the publishers there was that it took all of us to go to the other side of the planet for all the publishers to finally meet each other. The coolest thing to come from 2018 Essen Spiel was that all the publishers in Asia got together and started talking. And they started making these big conventions in 2019 so they could all go to each other's conventions, sell more games, introduce each other to each other's markets. Brilliant! But we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves here. So let's take a step back and we're going to do the top 20. That's right, 20 best board games from 2018 from Asia. Hey guys, I just want to apologize. The baby is crying again. I'm not shooting at night. This is the middle of the afternoon. In fact, it's like 12:30. I think it's totally fine. He's just crying. And it's kind of funny because you can hear the mom in Chinese going, please stop crying. Yeah, I'm still shooting. Number 20, Airship City by Analog Lunchbox. Now, if you've never heard of Analog Lunchbox, they're a very tiny publisher from Japan. It's like 2 people. In Airship City, you are building airships in a floating city. Airship City is a rondel game, but the rondel is this amorphous blob that can change shape all the time. It's really fascinating how you take your airships, which are these little pawns, and you have to push these cloud city around. And what's even cooler than that is that your pawns can leapfrog over each other. So when you start off with 2, it's not that big of a deal, but when you get to 3, they're able to jump and leap over each other. Wow, brilliant. And then you wrap that around a standard Euro game where you're either building airships or you're gaining points. I think mechanically this game is fantastic. Lots of fun, lots of really interesting decisions. However, it does feel a little bit cold, and I think that's because the art is just purely functional. There's no finesse or form to it. Like if you're in this debate of form versus function for your UI, this is strictly function. Their art has typically been very unique, and I think it's hit or miss for a lot of people. And Lunchbox is also known for being, well, a little strict on their player counts. While most publishers today try to push those player count range as far as they can from like 1 all the way to 5. Analog Lunchbox just says, no, this is a 3 or 4 player game only. That's it. And to be fair, yeah, it's a 3 or 4 player game only, and that's kind of it. You could house rules, and I believe I've seen some house rules for like a 2-player variant. In order to take full advantage of the leapfrogging that you do in this game, yeah, you're gonna need 3 people because you need more ships to jump over. Airship City made my original blog article, Top 10 Board Games from Asia of 2018, and it's since dropped then. And I think that's because, well, I guess the other games that eventually got around to that, I really enjoy more. But if you're interested in Airship City, do not fear, because this has been licensed and published outside of Japan, so you should be able to find this. Well, at least it won't be as difficult as finding some rare indie game from Japan like 3 years ago. Because that's not easy. Number 19, Let's Make a Bus Route. The original, not the dice game. Now, I already talked about this in my Sashi and Sashi video, so if you want to see like all of Sashi and Sashi's 8 games, well then check out that video. What I do want to mention about this game is that as for a roll and write, it's pretty revolutionary at its time. There was nothing else like it when this came out. Everyone was talking about like how different it was, how kitsch quirky like the game was, and I don't really know what that means, but I think it just means like unique, because that's definitely how it was. And I think it definitely felt odd to people because it's just very, very new, and not many people thought about games this way. But if you want to pick up this game, I definitely suggest you pick up the new yellow version called Get On Board. It has 2 maps with London and New York. I think I said England in the last video. Oh well, sorry. But what they did instead is that instead of people drawing on the board, they put these little wooden, I guess Agricola fence roads tokens on there. And I think that's a lot better because after telling people time and time again, don't draw over the icon on the map, they keep doing it and it's really hard to read and it just gets frustrating. I think the new version's just a lot more functional and I think it's probably a better pickup. Even though Takako Takarai's art is still much better. Number 18, Power On, which has been picked up by another publisher and called Power Failure. And, there's a lot of reasons for that, and I think that's actually a better name, but let me talk about the brief mechanics for a second. This is a nice little filler game, nice little thinky filler card game. In it, you're picking up resources and you're building power plants. You're building green power plants, you're building up coal, you're building up nuclear power. But the gimmick of the game is that, well, coal power plants are actually quite cheap. However, they do create pollution. And throughout the course of the game, every time you make coal, every time you burn coal, you have to stack this tower of coal. And eventually, there's so much pollution in this shared stack of pollution that eventually it falls when someone places it, and it creates this huge, clamorous, bad effect. And it has this great little push and pull with a little bit of dexterity mixed into this card game. I really like it. I know some people didn't, and it's a little bit divisive, but I think it's fantastic, and it's a fun little 2 to 4 player card game. The only problem that I have with it is that usually towards the end, you can kind of tell who's going to win. And so I think it ends a little bit later than I think it should. But that being aside, the whole mechanics and everything around it is a lot better. I'll probably get a Power Failure, because Power Failure, I think they redid the math on some of the cards and makes it a little smoother gameplay. Number 17, Coffee House. Now, you look at Coffee House and you think, wow, that's kind of dull looking. And even the back is just as exciting. And when you open it up, well, the components are not really that exciting either. So why is this number 17? This is another Analog Lunchbox game. And Analog Lunchbox, as I said before, like they're known for not having the flashiest components, and all their UI is very, very, very functional. But I like this game. Coffee House originally made my top 10 board games from Asia that I made 3 years ago. And now it's kind of fallen a little bit. But I still love Coffee House. It's a very interesting push your luck stock manipulation game. And it's called Coffee House because you go into different coffee houses and you're these big philosophers talking about these big ideas, and you're trying to collect and manipulate the stocks so that way it fits your favor. And you're trying to push forth these ideas. Now, if that theme seems kind of loose to you, well then yeah, it kind of is. It could be really about anything. But the mechanics is quite interesting. And I think it's definitely worth finding a copy, or at least playing the game to see if it's for you. And that's been my number 17, Coffee House. Number 16, I have no hands. Where are my hands? I have no hands. I'm sorry. Number 16, Yokohama Duel. Now, if you're thinking, how is this Yokohama Duel? Your box is really small. Well, this is the original version where it's very thin, very small, fits in a backpack. You might have the super huge deluxeified edition that's just massive. And well, I'm not going to deny the components in that are really nice. Man, I really like this travel edition. Now, if you've never played Yokohama Duel, it's basically Yokohama for 2 people. However, with Yokohama, they have this really cool logistics movement with your worker pawns. This is Yokohama Duel, and so Yokohama Duel doesn't have that. It's kind of taking that away. But everything else about Yokohama still exists. In it, it's just a worker placement game. You're getting resources, fulfilling contracts, building trade houses, so that way when your workers go to spaces, the actions are even more powerful. You pick up technology, and you're doing even more and more crazier and crazier and crazier things, and eventually, whoever has the most points at the end wins the game. This usually plays in 45 minutes. while I still like Yokohama the original more than this, and I would rather play Yokohama at 2 as opposed to this is still a really solid worker placement game for 2 people. The only problem that I have with it, and I think it's a big sin really, because it uses cards as workers, and that just drives me insane. So I made my own little wooden workers that I place onto the cards, and I find that a lot more pleasing, because picking up cards and printing out cards like that is just, I find that annoying. But pushing that aside, I really like Yokohama Duel. It is my least favorite of the trilogy, but still I think is a very solid game. And that's been my number 16, Yokohama Duel. Number 15, Border of Xanadu. None of you remember that song, and so Border of Xanadu, just looking at this, just looks like a fantastic, crazy game. But essentially, it's just, well, a watered-down Yokohama? Now, I think that's a little bit unfair. It definitely has a lot of Yokohama DNA. But just like Yokohama Duel, it doesn't have that weird logistical pattern that you do in Yokohama, where you have to chain your people together, similar to Istanbul. This is essentially just a worker placement, pick up and deliver contract fulfillment game. However, it's just really flashy, and if you really like anime art and that Japanese manga style, then you definitely should try and find this game. It's going to be extremely hard though, because Manifest Destiny, which is I think a publisher of like 2 people, is very, very tiny, so they don't make large print runs, so it's kind of hard to find. I found this one at SN in 2018. It does suffer though that the art is so flashy that it's not as functional. So it's a little bit weird how Yokohama doesn't have really flashy art, but all the art is very, very functional, and so the UI is very easy to read. Whereas this one is super flashy, but it's a little bit hard to read at times. So, I don't know, you're going to have to find and pick your poison somewhere. I actually really enjoyed this. I enjoy this more than Yokohama Duel, which I don't know what that says about me, but I really enjoy this game. And if you can find a copy, then whew, definitely give it a try. Border of Xanadu, my number 15. Number 14 is a very rare game. It's definitely not impossible to get because it's picked up by Japanime Games. But I thought for the longest time of starting my rarest rare gems videos with this particular game. And I definitely want to review it and give it a nice proper review later on. But number 14 is Tokyo Sidekick. This is a very rare English edition made by the publisher themselves. This is a massive game. I really like Tokyo Sidekick. Tokyo Sidekick is a cooperative game where you are all superheroes in this comic booky world of Tokyo. And each of you has, well, a sidekick. And you are having trouble because you're going around trying to solve all these little minor crimes throughout all of Tokyo. However, big bad enemies are coming around. I'll come around just to, ruin your day, which I think is typical in comic booky world of Tokyo. So you have to kind of balance it out between solving these little purse snatchers, between fighting like these big epic monsters that appear, and you can work together. But 3 things I love about Tokyo Sidekick is, number 1, it's hard. It is not an easy cooperative game. Number 2 is the world building, because wow, it does a really good job. Not only do you have like your own personal hero, but you also have sidekicks, and your sidekicks can change, and the sidekicks get special gadgets, and the way these player powers all interact with each other is pretty unique. In addition, there's also a sequel to this game where the lead character of this game dies, and they show you, that's not a big spoiler alert, not a spoiler alert, they show you his dead body on the cover. But wow, how cool is that? Sentinels of the Multiverse? Pfft, get out of here, because the world building in this one is so much better. Now, the art of Sentinel Multiverse is fantastic, and it definitely does look it, but I don't get that same world building effect that I did in Tokyo Sidekick. And what's really, really cool about Tokyo Sidekick is that if you can time it right, and multiple people are in the same space, well, you can play cards together collectively to bigger hits and bigger combos against the big bad enemies. And you're gonna have to do that, otherwise you will lose the game. But at the same time, someone's purse got snatched all the way on the other side of Tokyo, and you gotta run all the way over there. So there's lots of fun that you try in this game. Now, it is difficult to find this game. It's not easy. But definitely check out the Japanime Games website, and they should have an order form for it. The original game comes like these nice little standees, and the Japanime Games version has these nice acrylic stands. And I was really, really jealous of. But if you want big, epic, cooperative Japanese manga comic book action, then whew, it's going to be hard to beat Tokyo Psychic. My number 14. 14. And what's even cooler is that they have these little stories here. So you have your big bad guy, and then you have the little minions. And one of the minions in this game can actually be flipped and turned into a good person. Wow, really, really cool. Interesting. You don't really see that often. My favorite big bad is the giant pagoda that goes around stomping Tokyo, and you gotta fight it. That's right, giant pagoda. Cool. Number 13, 300, Earth and Water. Now, if you're watching my channel for a while, then you know that I'm a big Yasuichi Nakagoro fan. This version of 300 Earth and Fire was released this year by Nuts Publishing, a French publisher. This version is really, really nice. Like, they didn't have to do this and go all out, but they did, and thank you. But if you're looking for a nice little lunchbox war game that plays in about an hour, I definitely recommend 300. And yeah, it's about the movie 300. Well, not about the movie. It's about that same period of history, about Persia attacking Greece. And so now you have this asymmetrical game. Persians who have tons of numbers and kind of recruits, and you can span all over the map. And then Greece, who are better fighters, but there are a few of them. It's a nice card-driven game with, well, dice are a little bit swingy because it is a nice simple war game that takes place in 40 minutes. But I find this a lot of fun, very simple if you're curious about war games, but you don't want to go super hardcore heavy into hex and counter games right off the first bat, and you want to take something a little bit smaller, a little bit more approachable, then I think 300 Earth and Water is definitely worth exploring. Now, I've heard some people say that it's a little swingy because it's a dice game. Well, out of the games I've played, I've noticed that people lose from bad decisions as opposed to dice. Now, sometimes the dice can hurt you if you're doing like a Hail Mary play and you're just hoping that this could do it, and I like to play that way. And that's been my number 13, 300 Earth and Water. Number 12, Tokyo Highway. Now, this is a little bit of a cheat because it's appeared again, but this is the Tokyo Highway that has 4 players. The original version, which came out in 2016, only had 2. And I think Tokyo Highway works a lot better with 4 players, or 3 players. Now, if you've never seen Tokyo Highway, you don't know who It's In Games are. It's In is known for making interactive art. Their games are just gorgeous to look at because they look like nothing else that you've ever seen. It almost looks like a kid's playset if you didn't know that there was a scoring mechanism and rules behind this structured play. But I absolutely adore Tokyo Highway. If you want to know more about it, you can definitely check out the 2016 video where I go a little bit more in depth. But I think Tokyo Highway is just one of those fantastic works of art that you definitely owe it to yourself to play or own, because it's not going to look like anything else in your entire collection. One of the reasons why I love Asian board games is that they have different narratives and different stories that they want to tell from your typical Western games. And I think out of this whole list here, none of those captures that more than Tokyo Highway. My number 12. Now, if you looked at this list so far, all of these are pretty much heavy strategy games. So it's going to be a little bit of a surprise to you when I tell you that my number 11 is Meow Meow Meow. And yes, you can say that with me, Meow Meow Meow. Meow Meow Meow, Meow Meow Meow. Meow 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 is a party game, and I don't really like party games. It's also a social deduction game, and I really don't like social deduction games. I really like Meow Meow Meow. Most social deduction games kind of devolve into this shouting match. And while some people love that, and hey, God bless you, it's really not just for me. I don't find joy in that. Meow 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 plays from 5 to 10 players, and you are all part of the Meowfia. Go ahead, you can say it together, Meowfia. And what's really interesting is that one of them is an undercover cop, and one of the players is a cop. And so the cop comes into the room, and then 9 players all put their hands up, and then they put their hands down on the table. And once they put their hands down on the table, that's where the game really begins. The cop's going to ask all the players, where are the drugs, where's the shipment coming in, and everyone has to answer north, south, east, or west. The interesting thing about this game is that it deals with gesture, and that the undercover cop and the detective have this signal of north, south, east, or west. And it's really fascinating as you watch everyone answer, and you're watching how they're gesticulating, how they may play with their ear, how might they nonchalantly play with their hair. And it's fun to watch the pointing go from that. And I think that's more interesting because it gives focus to the social deduction aspect of the game. Someone might just have long hair, and they might just naturally just flick it back because that's just a natural thing and they don't even think about it. But that could become this huge witch sign. They're going, it's you, you play with your hair. So I find this game a lot of fun, and I definitely think it's worth exploring. And that's Meow Meow Mia. Woo! Thanks for watching the end of the video, guys. If you like what you see here and you want to see the channel grow, consider joining my Patreon. If you look at this tower of games and you realize, hey, you don't have X game blah blah blah, well, X game blah 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 might appear in my next video where I do the top 10 games of 2018 from Asia. So you definitely want to hit like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon. Wait, they're over there. Hit like, subscribe, hit that bell icon so you don't miss out on our next video. Once again, guys, my name's Jay. I play Asian board games, share it and find with all of you. Thanks for watching. Hey, before we end this video real quick, I want to say thank you to my lovely Patreon out there all the way from Thailand. Mwah! Love ya!